Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to talk something about code reuse. So by the name you might have guessed that code reuse is nothing but using the code again and again. That is, once you have the code, you could go ahead and reuse it as many number of times as you want. So essentially what happens is that whenever you are coding large piece of softwares or websites or any web application for that matter, what happens is you have a set of code which is going to be repeated a number of times. So what you need to do as a programmer is that you actually need to reduce the repetition of code, because what happens is that when you actually want to manage the code, that is whenever you want to make some changes to the code, it becomes extremely difficult to replicate the change at each and every position. So in order to avoid that, what we do is that we have a code at one place which is going to be reused, and instead of actually having multiple copies of the code, we actually reference the code from a single place. So if you find this thing a little bit confusing, let me give you a brief example of what I'm talking about. So in this tutorial, we will be talking about code reuse and functions. So functions are essentially used for the purpose of code reuse, and let me give you a simple example to make you guys understand what I'm talking about. So let's say you have a certain line of code, and I'm going to write in some code which is going to make no sense. So I'm going to type in print, and let's say this is going to print my name, and let's say the next line of code is going to print out some fruit, and let's say the third line of code is going to print out let's say the name of some city. Now I know that I have not given capital letters here, but that doesn't matter. So now what happens is that, let's say this is the code which you want to use again and again in your entire program, because you actually need it. So one thing which you could do is that once you have the code here, you could simply copy this code, go somewhere where you need the code, print it again, then again go here, print it again over here. But that actually is not the correct approach to do so, because this will give you the result. But what happens if you have to make changes in the first name? So what happens if you want to make changes to the first line of code? So what you need to do here is that you need to go here, make the changes, again go over here, make the changes, again go over here and make the changes here. So it is extremely difficult to manage such type of code. So what we do here is that instead of having the code written 3 times, we use something which is called as a function. So a function is nothing but, you could function. So let's say you want to execute each and every line of code in this function. So you actually need to go ahead and call the function. So in order to call the function, you simply type in function1, have opening and a closing bracket, and this thing right here is called as a function call. So what this is going to do is that it is going to call the function, and what calling the function means is nothing but executing the line of code written inside that function. So if you call this function, if you save the code and if you try to run it, as you could see, now the code written inside this function is executed. Now, as I earlier mentioned, let's say that you want to execute this code a number of times. So instead of actually copying and pasting this code, you could go ahead and make a call to the function over anywhere in your code. So let's say I want to make a call at 3 places inside my code, and if I save the code and now if I execute, as you could see, this code is actually executed 3 times without even writing the code thrice. So every time this function gets called, what essentially happens is that it is going to take the code and execute the code which is written inside the function. So we have the function call 1 over here, the second function call over here, and the third one over here. And each of them is essentially going to take this code, execute it, and have the result over here. So whenever I want to make changes to the code, what I need to do is that I don't have to worry about all the places in my code where I have to make changes. Instead, I have to only change the code inside a function. So let's say I want to replace the fruit by another fruit. So let's say I want a mango here. So once I make a change over here, the change is going to be reflected at each and every place. So as you could see, when we run the code now apple is replaced by mango at each and every place. So this is what is called as a code reuse, and this is what is called as a function. What code reuse does is that it makes the code much more elegant, efficient, and it makes it easy for the programmer to read the code. Also, maintaining the code becomes quite easy because right now, as you saw, when I made a single change, the change got reflected in each and every line of code, in each and every function call which we have over here. And after the code reuse, what we have learned is that we have learned how to perform the code reuse. So code reuse can be performed by using functions in your code. So functions are nothing but they are actually placeholders for the code. To define a function, you type in def, then type in the function name, have opening and a closing bracket, and these brackets are actually used to pass arguments to the function. So we are going to learn that in the next lecture. And after this, have a colon, and right after the colon have the code which you actually want in your function. So once you have defined the function, to actually execute the code inside your function, you simply need to have a function call. So a function call is nothing but a function name and brackets right in front of the function name. So this is essentially going to call your function, and whenever you call your function, the code which you have defined inside the function is going to get executed. So this thing right here is the function definition. This thing right here is the function call. This is the code which actually defines the function. That is, it is the code which is present in this function, which is function 1. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understood the significance of code reuse, and also I hope you understood the functions, the function definition, the function call. So thank you very much for watching this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you.